So we're going to make assumptions about how these preferences work. I mean, I guess I said properties, but we're really making assumptions about how these preferences work, and we often call those like axioms. So assumptions about preferences or preference relations. So we're going to make some assumptions about how they work. We are going to make assumptions about how these preference relations work. Often called axioms. All right, so the first assumption that we're going to make is that they're complete. And what does this mean? It means any two bundles can be compared. So we have the ability, we're assuming that we can always compare different bundles. Any two bundles can be compared. For instance, either x1, x2 is weakly preferred to y1, y2, or both. I mean, we can just compare these bundles x's and y's, and if there's a bundle z, we can compare bundle x to bundle y to bundle z, and y to z and to x, and so on and so forth. So this doesn't seem like a crazy assumption. We're just assuming we can actually compare these bundles. The second is that they're reflexive. And what this means is that any kind of bundle is at least as good as itself. And that kind of seems like a weird thing to say, but we can compare this bundle, and a bundle of x1 and x2, x1 amount of good 1 and x2 amount of good 2 is just as good as itself, another bundle with exactly x1 amount of good 1 and x1 amount of good 2. Again, this seems like a very trivial assumption. So assume any bundle is as good as itself. It is at least as good as itself. So for instance, x1, x2 has to be weakly preferred to another bundle of exactly x1 and x2. So again, this is kind of, I think, relatively like a trivial assumption that kind of makes sense intuitively, right? That a bundle with the same amount of goods has to be kind of at least as good as another bundle with that same amount of goods. Okay, then we're going to talk about one more assumption, which is going to be transitivity. And maybe this is a little bit more problematic. So let's erase this and talk about that third assumption. All right, so we just discussed that preferences, or assuming preferences are complete and they're reflexive, so they're complete in that we can compare any two bundles. They're reflexive in the sense that a bundle with the same amount of goods must be at least as good as another bundle with the exact same amount of goods. And then the third assumption, which I kind of said was maybe a bit more problematic, it's not even that it's problematic, it's that we're making an assumption now about behavior, which is different than like a necessary property in preferences. So I mean, to kind of start looking at bundles, they need to be complete, so we can actually compare bundles. But this idea that preferences are transitive is now an assumption about actual human behavior. rather than like, we need this assumption to be able to say anything about kind of consumer preferences. So what transitive preferences are, what transitivity is this. If x1 and x2 is weakly preferred to y1 and y2, and y1 and y2 are weakly preferred to this other bundle, z1 and z2, then x1 and x2 must be weakly preferred to z1 and z2. So this is what transitivity means. It means, if we weakly prefer bundle x to bundle y, and we weakly prefer bundle y to bundle z, that means we should weakly prefer bundle x to bundle z. This kind of this assumption about behavior is called transitivity.